Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker, your host for this edition of the program. And with me, our guest today is Carrie Binder, a graduate student researcher at the University of Minnesota. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on Access to Democracy. Now, I met Carrie back in December of 2022 at a Scam Jam that was sponsored by the Better Business Bureau of Minnesota and AARP. And Carrie and I began a conversation, and I discovered that she is in an interesting line of work that I think has some very important ramifications for our citizens here in Minnesota as well as elsewhere. So I wanted to invite Carrie to come in and talk about that. So, you know, we're in our 23rd year of this program, maybe 2,300 or so interviews. And Carrie, I believe you are our first graduate student. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm honored.
So there are so many interesting things that we want to talk with you about today. But let's start with a little bit about your background and what got you interested in the work that you're doing in your research, and then we'll talk a little bit about the research itself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I was born and raised in Minneapolis. I went to college at Loyola University Chicago. After that, I studied psychology there. After that, I studied abroad and taught English abroad. And then I worked many years behind the bar, and I felt that tending bar, I was sometimes people's therapist. And after COVID hit, I thought I'd make a change. I got into grad school. I went into social work. I wanted to do something in mental health, and I thought that that was a good track to go down because it really recognizes all different systems that affect one's health, mental health. And I applied for a graduate research assistant job because I always was interested in reading other research studies and getting those facts and numbers and really having that side to the story as well as people's own experiences. I liked seeing different sides of a problem. And being a graduate researcher, in our study we work with Department of Human Services, we work with Adult Protective Services, we work with the Department of Commerce. So it's really a multidisciplinary approach, and it reflects social work pretty well too.
Well, thank you for sharing that background with us. Now, when you started exploring doing some graduate work, you decided on doing your graduate work and the research at the University of Minnesota. How did you pick the U?
So the U is known for being a good research institution. I was living in San Diego in 2020, but since I'm from here, I thought maybe, I'd lived away for 12 years. Maybe I should try moving back. My parents would like it. It's cheaper here. And I ended up really liking it. So then I applied to the social work programs around the Twin Cities. I got into the U, and it was an easy decision to go there.
So from your experience, what does it take to be a researcher, a graduate student that's doing research? What does that involve? And we'll get into the specific subject that you're working on in a moment, but tell us about just doing graduate research work in general. What's that like?
So it takes a lot of organization and multitasking because you are also doing classwork and you're also interning 20 hours a week. I'm at Abbott Northwestern Hospital working in advanced heart failure and heart transplant. So for 20 hours a week, I'm there working with patients who are going through serious physical issues, and I'm kind of an emotional support for them. So, you know, the work that we do can be mentally draining. So being able to also take on a research role, which is 10 hours a week, you have to be a go-getter. You have to want to still be learning even outside of your classes, and be involved in the university in a different kind of way. And then when it comes to the actual work of researching, where you are, you know, it's a lot of coordinating with different agencies, with the professor, with the other student. So being organized and being able to write a lot is helpful.
So being in a graduate course and doing research, you're not coasting.
I wouldn't say that. I wish.
So this project, the research project that you're working on, how did you elect to take that particular subject or to take on that project?
Yeah, so I thought it would fit really well with my work at the hospital because a lot of people with an advanced heart failure are aging or seniors, and so I thought it would be a good complement to my work with them, especially because in fraud and financial exploitation, which is what our research project is on, there's a lot of mental health consequences for those issues, and being in the hospital, health issues is gonna you're gonna have a lot of mental health issues along with that too. So I really like seeing the effects that these have on this population.
So that's really what the study is about, and it's related to a proposed legislation action here in the state of Minnesota. What is that?
Yes, so the Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act, it was enacted in 2018. It is to protect those who are 65 plus or vulnerable adults from financial exploitation who do not know that they are being scammed. So say you have a cousin who is recently widowed, tells you that they met a woman on Words with Friends, the game.
Right.
And they have never met, but they've been talking for a year, and your cousin has been sending her money, maybe upwards of $10,000. And you are trying to figure out if this might be a scam. You know, there's some warning signs if they've never met, if they met online, if they're isolated, lonely. So you can make a report to the Department of Commerce through this Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act. And the Department of Commerce, the Senior Financial Fraud Ombudsman, will look at their case, do research, potentially contact your cousin, and see if it is grounds for implementing a hold on their accounts, which would mean that they are unable to send large amounts of money, but are able to keep paying their regular bills. It's just to kind of stop the bleeding if there is financial exploitation suspected.
And so this is a serious situation for consumers, for our community, and particularly for seniors who have limited capacity to deal with these kinds of issues, right? So Do you have some statistics about how prevalent these kinds of scams are here in Minnesota?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a myth that seniors or people that are cognitively impaired are the only vulnerable ones. In fact, if you're so cognitively impaired, you aren't much help to a scammer because you probably don't have control over your money or wouldn't know how to send money or go to the store and buy a gift card to tell them. So, so everyone is vulnerable to scams. It's just that seniors have a lot more money than people my age in their 20s and 30s. So that's why they are targeted more often. Also, they are home during the day. They can receive phone calls and emails quicker, and a lot of those scams on older adults are still mediated through telephone calls.
So these are some of the characteristics that make an individual a target of a scammer and make them more vulnerable than perhaps someone else might be that doesn't have those attributes. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe run through some of those aspects, those characteristics again, so that we make sure our viewers understand what it is that the scammer is looking for and how they exploit it. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So scammers are looking for people that are lonely, that are looking for connection. Scammers are looking for people that are retired with money, that have assets, that don't have a lot of maybe family involved in their everyday interactions or transactions, so that they can kind of sneak off with this person, have a relationship, get what they want, and then go. And sometimes these scammers will put in years of time before they even ask for money. So yeah, I would say there's a balance between being, cognitively impaired and being just vulnerable because I'm sure you probably get emails or calls, and so do I. So, everyone is vulnerable. It's just, do you have the time to be accepting of those phone calls or emails?
Sure. Yeah. AARP has a saying, if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. So I think what I'm getting is that part of your work is to try to help people understand that they may be being targeted by a scammer, and that if they are aware of it, then they're likely to not get caught up in the ether of the scammer.
Yes, definitely research shows that the more you know about scams, the less likely you are to fall for them. So that's why it's good to get the word out. Also to share your story if you have been scammed. There's a lot of shame involved with that, but not talking about it makes scammers get away with it more. So I think it's good that we're talking about it today too.
Yes, I think the more we can talk about it, the more the public, or the consumers, can become aware and become less vulnerable to a scamming attack. Now, you focused a little bit on what we call the romance scam, but there are other ways that seniors can be taken advantage of financially. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, so even my grandmother got a call from someone saying, hey grandma, I'm in trouble, I need some money right now. Didn't use any names, but kind of that urgency in the voice got my grandma on alert, and she was almost about ready to give them her credit card number and then said, can you tell me what your name is? And then they hung up. So those kind of scams, like your family member is in trouble, or this is Social Security, we're having a crisis right now, or this is an emergency and we need your information now. So getting that urgency up heightens their emotions where they're not thinking clearly, and a lot of times after the fact people will say, I felt like I was in a cloud, I wasn't thinking clearly. And that's how a lot of them operate and work successfully.
So really the scammer is trying to take over the emotional control of the target that they have.
Yeah.
By isolation, not wanting them to talk to anybody about any conversations or any transactions that they're having, by making it urgent. It's a sense of, you have to do this right now and do it exactly the way I'm telling you. So have you come across any findings that you could share that would help people not fall under that spell so quickly? And if they think they're getting under that spell, what should they do?
Yeah, so I would say some red flags that you should be aware of. If anyone tries to take over your computer, if they say, we have an issue, just do this so that I can log in and see your desktop or take over your screen, that's a huge red flag. Never do that. Another thing is, no company will ever ask you to pay them back using a gift card. So if they say we will only take payments in gift cards, that should be a huge red flag as well. So if you can remember a few of those tips, then maybe that'll trigger something in your brain to be on alert, and then you can start asking them questions. So I would say slow down, and then think of those red flags. And then also, if they say they're from, say, Best Buy, you can always say, let me do something and I'll call you right back. Call Best Buy, and then you'll know if it's a scam or not.
All of those are just great suggestions that you're sharing with us. Now, in your research, have you or are you actually interviewing victims of some of these scam techniques?
Yeah, so our plan is to interview victims who have had interventions from the Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act.
Okay.
Towards the end of our study. This is a 2-year study, so it'll end next spring, and we will be doing those interviews probably next winter. So not for a little while, but yes, we are planning on interviewing some victims who have had the temporary holds to evaluate the outcomes of that intervention.
And that's coordinated with the Department of Commerce, I think you
Yes.
mentioned earlier, who has the authority under certain conditions to lock down a person's bank account or credit union account so that money cannot be transferred out without their permission. Is that
Yes.
one of the provisions?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, just big transactions, not anything to stop their Netflix payment or if they want to send their grandchild a $100 check. That would be allowed to go through. And these holds last 15 business days, so 3 weeks. And then if there's reason to believe that the scamming is still going on, they can be extended for another 2 weeks. And if the client feels that it's not necessary, they can always appeal. But interestingly enough, we have not had, Commerce has not had a single appeal go through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the research topic that you're working on, does it have a sponsor, or is there some organization that is funding this to help provide the resources for this work to be done, or is it all just under the auspices of the U?
Yeah, so we have a grant with the Association of Community Living, and they funded this grant, and we have sub-awards and contracts with DHS and Commerce. So it's a really big deal. It's a 2-year project with multiple agencies, and it takes a lot of collaboration, and we're kind of in the getting to know you phase, where we're working with these different agencies that may have not collaborated much in the past on this issue, and now they are. And we've already seen improvement in communication between Commerce and APS, and it's for the benefit of those clients for sure.
So when the work is completed and your project has its whatever the output is, who will benefit from that work? Where does it go, and how would it be used?
Yeah, so I would say anyone who's susceptible to scams, which is everyone, will benefit from this research study. Those who have been clients under that Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act, for the future clients, it'll help them because we'll be able to know like how helpful was it for this type of population, or is 15 days too long or too short? And so just evaluating this act will help make it more effective in the future. And this is one of the first kinds of its studies in the nation. Not every state has an act like this to be able to put holds on accounts for people who are alleged victims. And so this is one of the first studies of its kind to evaluate that sort of intervention.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about somewhat the uniqueness of what goes on here in Minnesota with this particular act that is kind of the basis for the study that you're doing in your research. And the fact that this research may be a unique project in itself. Are you aware of any other states or any other institutions of higher education doing any work like this?
No, I mean, Dr. Marty DeLima, the professor I'm working with, has done a lot of research on different types of scams. There's a gift card scam study that she did last fall, but not on this specific Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act.
So, what was the impetus to do this study? I mean, it's great to know that you have some sponsors, some organizations working with you, you have the backing and the resources of the U, but what really was behind this initiative?
Yeah, I think, well, because scamming is so prevalent, we don't even really know to the extent to which people have been affected. So having some sort of law is very important in stopping more scamming. So I think the emphasis that like this law, we need more things like this. Mm-hmm. So being able to say what works, what doesn't work, will hopefully inform other states or other laws to get passed to help this. Also, we have an aging population. There's a statistic that by 2034, we will have more seniors 65 plus than we will children and teenagers for the very first time in U.S. history. So we have to be proactive about finding ways to stop scams.
That's a stunning way to describe what's happening to the demographics of our state.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you come across in the work that you're doing anything that really just stood out as impressive or surprising or shocking in any way that you didn't expect to find?
Yeah, I would say the effects of one's mental health from being scammed is surprising. When we met at the Scam Jam, I was chatting with a couple people who had been scammed. And some of them didn't even want to talk too much about it because it was so difficult, but they all said they had massive shame, guilt, it's like self-blame for something that, we don't look at it the same way as like domestic abuse or other types of victim crimes, but it has all the same impacts, plus romance scams, and you're left brokenhearted. So there's really a lot of negative impacts from these scams. And as someone who will be a mental health professional, it's important to understand the impacts of that.
I think that's an important message that a lot of people don't realize or they don't even think about. It's not just the financial loss that the target of a scammer may experience, but it's also, as you mentioned, the shame and the mental state that individual is left in many cases is more devastating than the financial loss. And I think that's a key point of what you're trying to study and to figure out, what more can we do to help people in that situation.
Yes, exactly. And the financial loss can be huge too, because a lot of these people are retired and then they don't have a way to make up that money and maybe lost their their cabin, or something that they will never get back, their lifestyle. So that's another big mental loss too.
So your work involves gathering a lot of data, which often isn't done in support of a particular piece of legislation or regulation. So that's really unique and helpful. And I think once you have this data compiled, that you'll be able to do some analysis, do some interpretation, and come up with some recommendations for more ways to help people who have become victims, and more ways to help people not become victims.
Yes, that is the goal for sure. We'll see, some of the things we want to look at are, do people lose money after these holds are lifted? And how effective is it when someone from the Department of Commerce calls them and tells them that they're being scammed, especially if the scammer used a telephone to scam them? Are they going to believe a person calling from Commerce? Yeah, there's so many data points that will be really interesting to look at once we get to that point. We're still at the beginning, and we have a data use agreement with Commerce, and we have to go through all of those identification, safety protocols, and
Privacy acts and all of those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Carrie, we've got a couple of minutes left in the program today. This is just very fascinating, very interesting and important work that you're doing. I think once you've completed the study and you have some reports available, we might invite you back on the program to share some of that information with us. But as we leave today, are there any other thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers about the work that you're doing or the career that you're pursuing? Yeah,
I want to say thank you again for having me. I just think it's a really important thing that we talk about financial exploitation and are open about the effects, and that it can happen to anyone, and that we should destigmatize it in order to help people get the help that they need, whether it's going to see a therapist or support from family or financial resources. I'd say we got to name it to tame it, and so I'm very happy to be a guest.
Well, that's a nice catchphrase, name it to tame it, so we'll have to remember that one as well. Our guest has been Carrie Binder, who's a graduate student doing a research project at the University of Minnesota that's related to the Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act, and studying some of the impacts that fraud and scam can have on not just seniors, but anyone of any age could be suspect and vulnerable to some of these scam techniques. Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your time and your work and your information with us today.
Thank you, Bill.